The shy girl who spent her life hiding behind library shelves suddenly finds herself thrust onto the stage to replace the MC at a major event. She's trembling, clutching her mother's old handkerchief, and in the front row, only one person is cheering her on, a stranger who once asked her to edit his speech. She doesn't know. That man is a millionaire CEO who's lost his way, and her quiet suggestion had shifted something in him, changed the way he saw everything. Sometimes, what helps someone begin again isn't applause, but a silent gaze that stays and a voice brave enough to rise. In the farthest corner of the Portland Public Library, where the light fell soft and silken across old wooden walls, Hannah sat alone, sorting through a box of returned children's books. The gentle rustle of paper, the scratch of a pencil marking notes. These were the only sounds that filled the quiet around her. No one noticed her, and she didn't need them to. She had long made peace with silence, the way some people learn to breathe underwater. Here there were no raised voices, no expectant eyes. Just space, just stillness. A place where the mind could drift, untethered, with the breeze through the windows. Every morning she arrived before anyone else. She loved the minutes, just before the library opened, when the whole world felt paused, and she could walk slowly through long, high-ceilinged halls lit by gentle amber light. Everything here had its place. Books alphabetized, genres neatly shelved, people in their familiar seats. No surprises, nothing to disturb the quiet rhythm she had carefully built around herself. But this morning, something shifted. The office door of Mrs. Eleanor, the library's director, cracked open and her voice floated out, low and cautious. "Hannah, could you come in for a moment?" She entered, still holding an old picture book in her arms, like a shield. On the desk were budget sheets, a folder stamped emergency proposal, and faded posters not yet finalized. "Our branch," Eleanor hesitated, "is losing funding. The city plans to close us down within 3 months if we can't turn it around." Silence settled. Outside, the wind stirred the white curtain at the window, just barely. Hannah didn't speak. But inside her something cracked, a small fracture in what had seemed whole. "We're planning a major fundraiser," Eleanor continued. "And I think you should join the planning team, lead the children's programming, or the kids love you, you know." Hannah shook her head, barely. I'm not good at things like that. I do well in the background." Eleanor smiled gently. "That's exactly why you're right for this. You see this place and you know it better than anyone. And the children trust you. If this library has a chance, it lives in the quiet kindness. You bring here every day." Hannah didn't answer, just nodded, asked to return to work. On her way back to the children's section, she paused beside shelf 4, where they kept her favorite childhood book. A deep blue cover, edges worn, titled "The Girl Who Spoke in Whispers." She pulled, sat down, opened to the page she'd dog-eared at 10, where the girl in the story steps out of the woods, though her voice had never been loud. She sat, holding the book, feeling as though her whole childhood, unnamed, unspoken, had quietly climbed into her lap. That afternoon, she stayed later than usual. On her desk, Hannah placed 2 things side by side, an unfinished event plan and a crayon drawing a little girl had given her the day before. A girl with low-tied hair, holding books, standing under a sky of stars. "Miss Hannah, the best storyteller in the world," it read in shaky purple letters. Hannah smiled. Then her eyes caught the test print of the fundraiser poster, bold title, and beneath it, key speakers, TBD. She sighed. And that's when something strange happened. A man stepped through the door. Someone unfamiliar. No rush in his step, no suit, just a quiet figure with a worn briefcase and the sort of careful gait that made every footfall feel considered. He paused at the front desk, unsure. Hannah watched him. Maybe out of curiosity, or maybe because the fading light of evening had landed on his face just so. "I'm looking for a book on writing speeches," he said, voice so soft she had to step out from behind the desk to hear him clearly. "I can help," she replied. And for the first time in years, Hannah stepped out from her refuge, not just to retrieve a book, but to begin something. That evening, she opened The Girl Who Spoke in Whispers again and wrote in the front cover, "Some people don't need to shout to be heard. They just need a moment and someone willing to stop and listen." Inside her, something turned, like the hinge of a door stirred by the wind, and this time the wind didn't just pass through Hannah, it moved with her. The next morning, after agreeing to join the fundraiser team, Hannah arrived at the library even earlier than usual, not because the workload demanded it, but because she hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Eleanor's, her voice not loud but clear, echoing louder than the ticking clock. "You are our last hope." She wasn't used to being responsible for anything beyond the shelves, even less to being seen. But this morning, as her footsteps echoed slowly down the long corridor bathed in soft overhead light, something inside her softened, as if yesterday's decision had cracked open a sliver of light. Hannah sat in the small lounge area, flipping through the early drafts of the program. She'd been asked to review the speaker's notes. It seemed like a simple enough task, until she reached the final name on the list, guest of honor, speech pending. She copied it onto the corner of a page, not sure who she hoped would fill that space. And just then the front doors swung open. A cold gust swept through the lobby, carrying the smell of damp earth and the click of approaching shoes. A man walked in, alone. No assistant, no phone, just a handful of ink-smudged papers and a look in his eyes, slightly lost, like someone stepping into a memory he wasn't sure belonged to him. Hannah recognized him instantly, the last name on the speaker. List, the man Eleanor had described as still uncertain about speaking. He doesn't like crowds. He looked around as if searching for something familiar in a room that had changed too much. "Sorry," he said, voice low, as though worn from too much silence or perhaps too much talking. "I'm Ryan. I have a speech. And I think I'm really bad at it." Hannah rose from her chair. She had never heard anyone introduce themselves that way. So plainly, so unguarded. I'm reviewing the drafts," she said, almost stumbling on the word reviewing. It felt too authoritative for someone like her. Ryan sat down and opened the stack of pages. Red marks and crossed-out lines filled the margins. Scribbled notes like, "Emphasize this, pause here." As she scanned them, she saw herself. The way she used to write cover letters only to tear them up, afraid they sounded too small, too unremarkable. "May I read it?" she asked. He nodded. She picked up the first page and began. The words were polished, precise, too much so. There was no breath in them, but no heartbeat. "Did you ever go to libraries?" she asked, casually but deliberately, like leaving a door slightly ajar. Ryan paused. Something in his face shifted. "When I was a kid, I practically lived in one. It was the only place no one asked, 'Where are your parents?'" She looked up. The typed words were still there, waiting, but her heart had already moved. He wasn't just a guest speaker. He was someone like her, someone who had once used books as shelter. "You should start with that," she said, gently pressing a finger to a crossed-out sentence. Nothing inspires like the truth. Together, they rewrote the speech. Hannah suggested scrapping the entire introduction. Instead, she asked Ryan to begin with an image. A worn library chair, a 10-year-old boy reading Charlotte's Web, trying to forget how cold winter could be when the power was out. Midway through the edits, Ryan noticed the book resting in Hannah's lap, the one she carried every morning like a talisman. "You like that one?" he asked. "The Girl Who Spoke in Whispers." She never raised her voice, Hannah replied. But the whole village still listened. He said nothing. But when he folded up the final draft, he looked settled, not because the speech was perfect, but because he'd found something closer to his own voice. "And your name is Hannah," he smiled. "A storyteller's name." When he left, Hannah remained in her seat, the revised speech resting in her lap. Next to it, the pen he'd accidentally left behind, engraved Carter Technologies, "Where Voices Begin." For the first time in years, Hannah hadn't just edited a speech. She had revised something in herself, a quiet belief that even those who Speak in whispers can help others be heard, and in doing so, she'd heard herself a little more clearly too. In the days following their first meeting, Hannah began to notice something quietly unusual. Ryan had started showing up at the library more often, never loud, never drawing attention, but always just enough to make her notice. He didn't ask about the speech again, didn't mention the editing session. He simply appeared, and sometimes with a black leather notebook in hand, sometimes lingering near the children's section, flipping absent-mindedly through picture books at IDC. First, she thought it was coincidence. That the times they crossed paths at the checkout desk, the printer, or when he caught a runaway poster the wind had pulled from her display, were just that. Coincidence, in a small building with few corners to hide in. But then, one quiet Friday afternoon, just after the rain had passed, Ryan walked in holding 2 paper cups and that familiar half-smile of his. I figured. You might like your coffee not too strong, he said, setting one down gently on her desk, then stepping back like he wasn't sure if kindness had overstepped. Hannah froze. She wasn't used to gestures like this, especially not from a man whose eyes were still and deep, like a lake that had swallowed many storms, and yet made her heart skip in the smallest ripple. Thank you, she said, turning away too quickly, as if the warmth of his gesture had touched somewhere. She wasn't ready to uncover. That day she watched him from behind the shelves. Ryan sat in the children's reading area, holding a picture book, eyes following the laughter of the little ones. No one knew who he was. To them, he was just a quiet, slightly odd man with patience. A young girl toddled over and handed him the giving tree. Ryan read slowly, his voice low, hesitant, like he was reading not to her but to the child he once had been, the one he might have left behind. Hannah turned away. Inside her was a tangle, one part wanting to step closer and ask why he kept returning, why he sat there as though this place somehow belonged to him. Another part whispered, "Careful, don't let yourself fall too far." Later, as she was tidying up, she found Ryan's black notebook left behind on the table. She hesitated, then picked it up. On the first page, in handwriting slightly uneven but honest, was a single line. "If I was once a boy who read to survive his childhood, then now I write to remember him." She stopped. She hadn't meant to read more, but a loose page slipped from between the covers. A sketch, a girl reading among children, no fine details, but it was unmistakable. The low ponytail, the cardigan she wore nearly every day. Her heart paused. She quickly closed the notebook and placed it back. But her mind wouldn't stop looping the questions. Why had he drawn her? Was it unconscious, or is intentional? And if intentional, one why? That night, Hannah took home the first draft of Ryan's speech. She laid it next to her unfinished journal, the one where years ago she'd dreamed of writing children's books. The ink on those pages had dried long ago, but in the soft patter of rain against her window, she picked up her pen and wrote something new on a blank page. Not everyone who enters your life comes with a reason. Some just need to be heard and find a quiet place where they finally belong. She didn't know who she was writing about, but she knew what she was feeling, something she had denied since the moment he first stepped into her quiet world, closer than she expected, and more dangerous than she dared to admit. Next morning, she returned his notebook to the desk with a small note. "I kept this safe for you. Don't worry, I didn't read anything." But inside she knew the truth. She had read just enough to know her heart would never be the same. Do you believe a stranger can stir your heart with nothing but a gentle gaze and a few forgotten pages? If you've ever experienced that quiet kind of connection, the kind without declarations, without names, share it in the comments. Maybe you've just found a piece of your story within theirs. And stay tuned. Hannah's journey is only beginning. That Thursday afternoon, the rain was relentless. It tapped steadily against the library roof, like a melancholy soundtrack played on loop. The damp air softened everything, the light filtering through pale curtains, the scent of old pages. Even the quiet rustle of books sounded like sighs. Hannah was retaping a few posters for the upcoming fundraiser, for the third time that week. She worked with meticulous care, smoothing each edge as if straight lines could somehow untangle the mess inside her. Ryan came again, but this time, no coffee, no shy greetings. He stood by the door for a while, hair damp, his coat stained, at the cuffs from rain. He said nothing, and somehow that silence made Hannah look up. "Are you okay?" she asked, the first time she'd spoken first. He nodded, but it wasn't convincing. Then he stepped forward, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his coat pocket. "I tried working on the speech again," he said, his voice low, tired. "But I kept tearing it up, then starting over, then tearing it again." Hannah set the scissors down, walked toward him, partly out of concern, but partly because something about him today wouldn't let her look away. "Do you want to talk about it?" He sank into one of the low chairs in the children's reading corner, where all conversations seemed to breathe easier. His eyes landed on a child's drawing taped to the wall, a house with glowing windows. "When I was a kid, none of our windows ever looked like that," he said, voice soft, like he was telling someone else's story. "My mom worked 2 jobs. Some nights she didn't come home. I used to go to the public library down the block and they didn't ask anything, just opened the doors and let me sit." Hannah didn't interrupt. She sat beside him, not too close, but close enough to say, "I'm here. Take your time." "I read everything I could," he continued. "Not to learn, to forget. Forget the dust at home and the cold, the neighbors shouting through the walls, and forget that I didn't belong anywhere." He paused, then added with a half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "Books were the only place I didn't have to pretend. Which is why I've never stopped coming back to libraries, even now's when I could buy one." The last sentence hung in the air, not prideful, not performative, just true, and in that stillness, pieces began to fit together. The engraved pen, Eleanor's mention of a major donor who prefers to stay out of the spotlight. And now this, your Carter Technologies, she said quietly. Ryan was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "I built it. But I never liked being the one in front. I just wanted to keep something real." Before the noise swallowed it all, Hannah didn't speak. She didn't have to, because in that moment she saw it clearly. Behind the polished title was a boy who had once been afraid of the dark, just like she had been. Her soul shaped by stories, surviving through pages as she still did. Silence fell again, but it wasn't heavy. Outside, the rain tapped on. On the table nearby, Charlotte's Web lay open to its middle pages, like it had been waiting for someone to finish the story. "I'm reading the final chapter to the kids next week," Hannah said, smiling faintly. "If you'd like, you could read the beginning." Ryan turned toward her, his guard finally gone. "I'd be honored." And so, under the gentle rhythm of spring rain, 2 people, who had seemed to live in separate worlds, found one another in the place they had both once felt most lost. Among old stories, on quiet pages, inside the kind of silence that finally lets you be heard. That morning, on the day of the event, Hannah arrived at the library earlier than usual. The space was as it always had been, soft light pouring down through the skylight, the creak of wood beneath careful steps. And yet, there was a strange kind of stillness hanging in the air, as if the whole building was holding its breath for something about to begin. Inside her, everything was churning. She tried to steady herself by focusing on the smallest details, checking seat, maps, testing microphones, aligning name tags for guest speakers, arranging cookies for the children's area. The more insignificant the task, the tighter she clung, as if staying busy could muffle the thrum of panic rising in her chest. Ryan had arrived. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed her, calm, present, grounding. And in that silent gaze, she felt steadied. Not because he told her not to be afraid, but because his quiet presence made her fear feel seen and safe. Then came the message from the organizing team. "The MC is sick, won't make it." Hannah froze. She read the text over and over, as if repetition could somehow undo it. Her stomach clenched, The old memories surged, the ones where a younger version of herself had tried to recite a poem in class and ended in tears, her voice swallowed before it even began. Eleanor approached, worry etched across her face. "Hannah, you know the schedule better than anyone. There's no one else who can do this in time." She didn't answer, just stared at the printed program. The name of the MC had been crossed out in red, her heartbeat scattered. Then Ryan stepped forward. He said nothing, just held out a folded piece of paper, one she recognized instantly. It was the first draft of his speech. The one she had helped him rewrite. At the very bottom, a new line in his handwriting. "If you once taught me that truth is the strongest voice, then today, let yours be heard. No pressure, no persuasion, just a note, and an unwavering." Look, Hannah walked away down the hallway. She didn't run, but she needed to breathe, to find a corner untouched by expectations. She stopped at the old supply room, the one where as a child she'd hide with a book until the world felt less overwhelming. In the corner sat an old storage box. No real reason for her to open it, but her hands moved on instinct. Inside, unused supplies, worn picture books, paint-stained drawing boards, and a small faded handkerchief patterned with tiny blue flowers. She knew it instantly. Her mother had always folded it into her backpack before every school presentation, in case your hands sweat, or in case you need to wipe your tears. She picked it up. The fabric was worn, the edges fraying, but there was still the faintest scent of lavender, like a memory folded into the threads. An hour later, Hannah stood behind the curtain. She could hear everything. The murmur of the audience, the crackling mic check, the soft rustle of restless children. In her pocket, her hand gripped the old handkerchief. Her heart thudded like a drum in her chest. They called her name. The lights went up, and she stepped out. There was no turning back. She stood at the microphone, looking out at the room, not hundreds, just faces, and one gaze in the front row in Ryan's, steady, unreadable, yet somehow full of quiet reverence, not urging her, not cheering, just listening, as if waiting to hear the lesson she once gave him. She drew a breath. Her fingers still trembled, but her voice did not. "Hello, I'm Hannah, a lover of books and of the people who've been healed by them." She didn't perform. She simply told stories of a boy reading alone because no one ever came to pick him up, of an old woman who came every evening to read poems aloud to her husband's empty chair, of a mother curled with her child in the corner, holding a book open long after both had fallen asleep. She spoke not with volume but with depth, and the room went still. No coughing, no shifting, just breath, held. And when she finished, she said, "I used to think I wasn't big enough to stand in front of others, but I've learned the only thing I needed was someone who believed my voice was worth hearing." The applause came, not in waves, but in steady, gentle rhythm, like breathing. She bowed her head. Her eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. Because for the first time in her life, she felt it. Unmistakable, irrevocable. She was enough. That evening, after the lights on the stage had dimmed and the last of the audience had gone, Hannah remained seated in the quiet auditorium. A few paper cups lingered on the front row, stray notes left behind, the faint hum of the building's ventilation like a soft, steady breath. It was all just fragments, echoes of something that had just happened, and she wasn't entirely sure had really happened at all. She set the microphone down carefully, as if it might still carry a heartbeat. In her hand, the wrinkled handkerchief her mother once folded for her remained, damp from hours of being held too tightly. Her chest wasn't bursting, her mind wasn't racing. It was calm, like a lake after rain, still but deep. She didn't notice Ryan at first walking down the aisle from the side corridor. He didn't hurry. It was as if he too needed time to gather all that had just passed. When he reached the edge of her row, the last spotlight above them cast his face in soft amber, like the final glow of a long afternoon. "You did what I once thought I never could," he said, his voice low, steady. "And you made it look like you've belonged up there all your life. Hannah smiled faintly, her gaze drifting from the stage to him. "I just said what was true," she replied. "The way you once did. Not because I felt brave, just because there wasn't another way." He nodded, slowly. In his hand, a white envelope, creased slightly at the corners from being held too long. He extended it but didn't press it into her palm. "This is an official commitment," he said. "Long-term funding, no conditions, no signs, no logos. It's just let this place keep breathing for the kids, for people like me." She took the envelope but didn't open it. Not because she doubted him, but because what mattered most was already spoken, or rather, unspoken. "And it was enough. Why this library?" she asked softly. Ryan exhaled, not a sigh, but the kind of breath that closes a door gently behind you. "Because you're here." Hannah looked up. Their eyes met, and there was nothing grand in that moment. Just a shared stillness between two people who had stopped pretending. "It's not because you helped me fix a speech," he continued, "or because you reminded me of who I used to be. It's because you taught me something no one else did. That kindness doesn't have to be loud to change a life." Hannah wanted to reply, but she wasn't sure she had to, because what mattered most between them didn't live in dialogue. It lived in the silence where neither of them looked away. Outside, a night wind carried the scent of pine through the hallway. Somewhere, distant city sounds softened into hush. Ryan sat down beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to share the view of the now empty stage, where their stories had overlapped without warning. "I always thought someone like you wouldn't care about someone like me," he said quietly. "Someone like me?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Someone who still believes in small things," he said. "In dreams, while I've gotten used to spotlights and contracts and doubt." Hannah smiled. "And yet," she said, "you were once a boy who read books every afternoon. That boy didn't go anywhere. He just needed to remember." He looked at her for longer than usual, and this time he said nothing. Because he didn't need to. They sat there among rows of empty seats and fading echoes, no touch, no declarations. But something had shifted. They were no longer strangers in a library, no longer the girl who helped revise a speech, no longer donor and staff. They were two people who had seen each other, fully, quietly. Before leaving, Ryan placed something on the table beside her, a hardcover book. No title, just a simple drawing on the cover, a girl with her hair tied low, sitting among a circle of laughing children. Hannah opened it. On the first page, a single line, handwritten. "The first story for the first person who made me want to tell mine again." She touched the cover gently and knew something had truly begun. No grand gestures, no confessions, just a promise and a heart quietly opened. Like the first page of a book finally ready to be read. A week after the event, the library had returned to its usual rhythm. Shelves stood in their quiet order, children once again lined up for Hannah's Thursday afternoon story hour, and the building exhaled its familiar hush. But for Hannah, something had changed. Not in the world around her, but deep within. Since the night she stood on stage, she'd received more compliments, handshakes, and admiring glances than in the past 5 years combined. And yet, strangely, she didn't feel like she'd become someone. If anything, she felt like she'd come home. One afternoon, with the children's room unusually quiet, Hannah opened the drawer of her desk and pulled out a new notebook, a gift Ryan had quietly left alongside the book he gave her last week. It was covered in deep velvet blue, untitled, with just a single line embossed in gold at the bottom corner. "Let the stories begin." She uncapped her pen and wrote the first line of a story she'd been holding close for years, about a boy who lived in the back of a library shelf, waking each day to the creak of the front door, falling asleep with the last flicker of the reading lamps. The words came slowly, imperfect, but real. And most importantly, they came from a place inside her that no longer feared being heard. She wasn't writing to be published. She was writing because, for the first time, someone had made her believe her voice was worth listening to, even on paper. The next day, as she was tidying up the story corner, Hannah found a small envelope tucked into her staff mailbox. No. Name, inside a letterhead marked with the Carter & Co. logo and a handwritten note. You once asked why I stayed. I told you it was for the community, that's true, but I remained because of someone brave enough to tell her story first. This is a preliminary publishing contract. There's no deadline. No obligation, only one thing required, that you believe these first pages deserve to be turned. Hannah sat for a long time, the letter in her lap. She read the note again and again. But the emotion rising in her had nothing to do with the prospect of becoming an author. It had everything to do with being seen. She didn't call Ryan, didn't send a reply. Instead, she slipped 3 pages of her manuscript into a white envelope and tucked in an old photograph. A 12-year-old girl with her hair tied low, clutching a children's book, eyes bright like a lake after rain. No note, no promises. Just a piece of herself, placed in the hands of someone who could read the things she never wrote down. That evening, when she sat down to read to the children, Hannah brought no script. She read from the story she'd just begun writing, and when she reached the moment where the boy stepped out from his shelf to search for light, a small voice piped up. "Miss Hannah, does the boy find someone?" She paused, smiled. "Yes," she said. But not right away. First, he has to learn how to tell his own story. After the children left, Hannah remained to gather the books. On a nearby chair, a forgotten cap. She picked it up and stepped outside, where the evening sun had spilled gold across the path. Ryan was standing at the library steps, still. Familiar. Like a bookmark in her favorite chapter. She walked toward him and held out the cap. Not because it was his, but because something about the gesture felt like a page being turned. He smiled, took it, didn't ask. Just looked at her. Not for an answer, only for presence, and that was enough. No one mentioned the manuscript. No one spoke of contracts. But both of them knew. The first pages had been turned, and the next ones, they'd write together. 2. Voices, once afraid they weren't loud enough, now building something worth telling. Not loud, but true. On an early autumn morning, when the sun had not yet turned gold but was warm enough to dry the dew from the window panes, Hannah opened the library with a feeling she couldn't quite name. It wasn't because there was an event that day. It was because, for the first time, she truly wanted people to come. Not to be seen, but to share something. In the children's corner, colorful pillows, soft blankets, and low bookcases had been arranged with care. On the wall, a poster drawn by the kids read, "Special story time with Miss Hannah and a secret friend." She laughed when she saw it. Ryan had definitely approved it, and clearly hadn't protested the title. Ryan arrived earlier than expected. He wore a simple grey sweater and carried a woven basket full of books. He didn't say much, just nodded politely to the staff and walked to her side, as if they'd done this 100 times before. Story time began. The children gathered around, their eyes bright with wonder, when they saw both Miss Hannah and Mr. Ryan sitting together on the long bench. In that sunlit room, there were no CEOs, no shyness, only a storyteller, a listener, and a room full of small hearts ready to be filled. Hannah opened the first printed draft of her book, The Boy in the Bookshelf, a sample copy sent by Ryan's team. The pages weren't bound, not yet polished, but that didn't matter. The story had already begun. Her voice was soft even, warm as freshly steeped tea. Ryan sat beside her, occasionally voicing a supporting character, making the children giggle. At one point, Hannah looked at him. He looked back, no grand smiles, no tearful eyes, just a quiet, mutual acknowledgement. "You're here. I see you." When the story ended, a little girl raised her hand. "Miss Hannah, does the boy go back to the bookshelf?" Hannah paused, then smiled gently. "No. He finds a library much bigger, with light, new friends, and someone who believes he's worth hearing." After the reading, the children spilled outside to play. Hannah and Ryan stayed behind to tidy up. They didn't speak much, but their rhythm was shared, lifting books, folding blankets, stacking chairs, like a quiet choreography, a music known only to them. As Hannah shelved the last book, Ryan handed her another, this time the official print. Her name glowed on the cover. The publishing logo was barely visible in the corner. He said nothing, just placed it in her hands and brushed a thumb gently along the spine. "Next time," he said, half playful. "Will, you read part 2? Fine, only if someone's there to do the funny voices," she answered. They both laughed, fine, without awkwardness, without restraint, as if their relationship too was like this newly published book, not yet promoted, not yet placed, on a shelf, but with a first sentence that stood strong. By the time the sun leaned westward, Hannah stood at the library steps, watching the children play under the slanting light. She realized the emptiness that once clung to her no longer had a place. Inside her now was laughter, storytelling, and something soft and certain. Not quite love, but something real and beginning. Ryan stepped up beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just stood there, and that was enough. A small boy ran up, tugged Ryan's sleeve. "Mister, your stories were funny. Will you come back?" Ryan crouched down, smiling. "If Miss Hannah says it's okay." Hannah looked at the boy, then at Ryan. She didn't answer right away, just nodded, slowly, deliberately, as if to keep the moment alive a little longer. No grand scene, no declarations, just a library, a story, and two people brave enough to truly hear each other, and like all beautiful stories, there was no ending line, only a new page turning, one that Hannah, this time, knew she would be the one to write. Thank you for staying until the very last moment of this story. We hope you felt what took Hannah a long time to discover, that sometimes the quietest voice are the ones that change the world, if you believe. Gentle voices deserve to be heard. Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next healing story.